Hey everyone, so today we're going to be talking about Santa Claus is Coming to Town for Violin 2. And before we talk about the overall character of this piece, I just want us to feel comfortable with the notes because this Violin 2 part is one of those pieces that the Violin 2 part is actually harder than the first violin part because the first violin part, everybody knows the Santa Claus melody and that's what they're basically playing. But for us, we have what's called the inner voices. So for Violin 2 and viola here, we have a lot of notes that aren't, usually what we think of when we think of Santa Claus. So for example, a lot of D sharps all over the piece, and I'll kind of go over how to tackle that right now. So the first part I want to look at is pretty straightforward. It's measure 12, and you just have a low 1 E flat. So the rest of the piece, it will say D sharp, but I want you to think of them as an E flat because sometimes it's easier for us to think that way when we play low 1. So here's measure 12 and 13 slowly. 1, 2. So I'll just practice that low 1 very slowly and clearly until you get really familiar with what that note sounds like. And now the next part I want to look at is 26 to 27. So here you have E to D sharp or E flat, and that's a half note. So your fingers are very close together, they're touching, right? And when you're coming from an open string before in measure 25, I would actually play 26 with the fingering 2, 1, 2, 1. So it looks like this. So 2, 1, 2, 1, you're basically in what we call half position. That might be a little bit scary and a new concept, but it's really just playing a little bit further back, away from you than first position. It's basically the lowest position we can go as violinists. And what you're doing is basically placing, how you can find that position is placing your low 1 on that D sharp, and then just putting your E right next to it. So your fingers are touching, they're very close. And then in 27, you can slide a half step up, so 27 will be first finger again on that E. And this will bring you back into first position so that you can play measure 28 normally. So here's 26 through 28. 1, 2. So basically, anytime you see a D sharp in this piece, you can probably play it with a low 1. A high 4 is going to be pretty difficult in this piece. But there is an opportunity for you to use your fourth finger, and that's at measure 48 and also in measure 8. That is a little bit difficult to play an open E there. Normally, I love open strings. They make our instruments ring a lot. But here, because of all the string crossings, you probably want to stay on your A string and play that fourth finger. So it sounds like this. Here's measure 7 and 8. 1, 2. So that fourth finger comes in at beat 2 of measure 8. So now that you're familiar with some of the chromatic notes, the accidentals, D sharps in this piece, let's talk about the overall character. So we all know, we all have our own image of Santa Claus in our heads, and I'm pretty sure that they're all pretty similar to one another, our versions of Santa Claus. And, he's a very big, jolly fellow, and we want to be able to mimic that character with our bow. Everything we do is in our bow. Your left hand is just learning the notes, but in this piece, how we can express that character is with our bow. So when you have passages like measure 7 that I just played, measure 7, measure 9, or measure 21 to 22, those notes don't have a staccato marking the dots underneath them, but we still want to play them on the shorter side. So not as short as staccato, but just more brush stroke. So it kind of sounds like this. Here's 21 to 22. 1, 2. So notice how here, I'm not playing short off the string or anything like that, but I am stopping my bow and staying in the middle of my bows to get that light, jolly, laughter kind of sound. And 22, it might also be a good idea to use the fourth finger on that D. so to avoid any string crossing problems there. The next part I want to talk about is going from Arco to pizzicato at measure 37. This piece is kind of fast. It's on the faster side, I would say. It's half note equals 90. And just a reminder, half note equals 90 means that we're counting in 2 now. So yes, it's still in 4/4, but we're thinking in 2. So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, our metronome is 1, 2, 3, 4. So really the big beats are 2. And it's quite fast when you put it that way, but start slow whenever you play measure 37 through 38 and practice going from Arco to Pizz. It could be really helpful to stay at the lower part of your bow so that you can just be ready and in position to Pizz. I'll play that for you slowly before we talk about it more. 1, 2. So I would practice it around that tempo or even slower before you work your way up to our goal tempo, which is half note equals 90. But if you really can't get it and you feel like you've been practicing for weeks on this, it would be okay to drop out the downbeat of 37 Arco so that you can be ready for beat 2 of the pizzicato. Or if you'd like, you can also drop out beat 2, which is the pizzicato, and play beat 3. So you can really try to practice it. I think most of us can get it, but if you don't feel comfortable doing that, feel free to drop out 1 beat so that you can switch from Arco to Pizz. So one thing I do want to say for both of the violin parts is at the very end, measure 58 and 59. So what we have is a down bow D whole note that has a glissando, which means slide, right? So we're sliding our finger all the way down to that open G downbeat at the very last measure. I would actually play both of these measures, 58 and 59, all in one down bow. And basically just place your 4th finger and slide all the way down until you hit the downbeat. So practice with the metronome, but when we're going slowly, it sounds like this. 1, 2. Here, I'll play it again a little bit faster. 1, 2. So the only thing is I would sit on that main note, the 4th finger D, just for a little bit, maybe for half of the measure or even a quarter of the measure, so 1 beat, before you start that slide so that the audience can hear what that note is supposed to be before you start that slide. So with that said, let's play Santa Claus is Coming to Town for Violin 2 at half note equals 90. 1, 2, ready.